Hello everybody and welcome along to a brand new video today where, well, we've had all the excitement last night of Spyfall Part 1 airing, a brand new series of Doctor Who beginning with some pretty major shocks, I think it's fair to say. I hope you guys enjoyed me and Megan's reaction to the episode yesterday. If you haven't seen that already, go check it out now. I thought it was a pretty good one. It was a pretty fun one to do, given that there's a really, as I say, a pretty major moment to react to at the end of this episode. But now it's the opportunity to kind of delve a little bit deeper, having had a day to think about it a little bit more. I've watched it again. I've kind of am able to collect and gather my thoughts on this episode, should we say, a little bit more, and try and give you my review of Spyfall Part 1. Now, first thing I want to say before I get into it, which I did say yesterday, but just in case you didn't see that, was that for each episode of this series, I'll be doing a video looking at the fans' response to each episode of Series 12. Based on your guys' comments, I'm going to look through all your comments and include some in a video and put it all together to kind of give a general, what's the general fan consensus on each episode of Series 12. So if you want to share your opinion and get it into the video, hopefully, I won't get them all in, but certainly I'll get a fair few in there, then I'd love you guys to comment down below with what you thought of this episode. Whether it's just your 3-word review or your proper detailed paragraphs long comment, either or, that's brilliant. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Whether it's positive, whether it's negative, I'm very happy to hear both sides of the argument. Just please, justify if you can. Unless you're doing a 3-word review, then please try and justify why you really liked it or really disliked it, rather than just saying, I hate Jodie, therefore I dislike it, or the Doctor shouldn't be a woman and I don't like it. I'm not going to include those because they don't really give anything. They're not in use, are they? So I'm happy for you to dislike it, but let me know in the comments below why, and then hopefully I'll include some of the videos. So yeah, I'd love to hear you guys' comments and thoughts on this episode to compile into that, but now let's get cracked into the review. So really, where do we start with Spyfall Part 1? I don't quite know, because it's such a sort of a roller coaster ride of a story. So yes, I think that's one of the first things to talk about really, is the scale of this piece. I mean, you look at just the opening sort of pre-title sequence and we go to the Ivory Coast in Africa, we're on a plane on the way to Tokyo over in Japan, and then we're in Russia seeing all these 3 spies getting killed. I mean, that's initially just giving away with some great scale. It's kind of, to an extent, reusing a similar idea that they used at the beginning of Resolution when we saw the Dalek that was split up in 3 different places and that idea. But I didn't mind that. I still thought it worked really effectively. Then establishing all the main characters back on Earth, back in their they've sort of almost reassumed their normal lives, I think, to a point. I don't know quite why they decided to kind of go back to Earth and back to their normal lives. Ryan's clearly terrible at lying about the fact that he's been away. A nice little moment where we get a reference to Grace again, which I did think that Bradley Walsh played really well as Graham in that moment. It felt really effective, just like giving us that one little reminder of this is the thing that happened in the last series, just a reminder, just a bit of context, but that it's not something we're going to dwell on anymore because that was closed off in Series 11. I think that's important, that we got a little nod, but that's all we need. We don't really need anything further on it now. We can leave it at that. Obviously it's always going to affect Graham a little bit, but it doesn't need to be talked about in every other episode. So I thought that was quite a good way of doing it. And bringing Yaz back in as well, giving her a bit more to do, having her connection to the police again, I thought was quite well done. Just reminding us of her backstory, because it felt like that was kind of lost after the first episode of Series 11. So I was pleased the way that was all set up, and then the Doctor I love that, the Doctor in a sort of car repair shop, essentially trying to repair the TARDIS. I'm not quite sure how convinced I am with the whole you can stick cables up underneath the TARDIS, like it's bigger on the inside. Does it really work like that? I don't really know, but we'll roll with it. I guess we'll roll with it. Why not? Why not? For me, this is probably as much as these scenes do work reasonably effectively early on, I think this is probably the only point of the story where it feels a little bit sort of slow, maybe. It kind of feels like it's a little bit slow to get going, as we sort of have quite long scenes with each of these main characters, trying to re-establish them as characters in the show and things like that, which I can understand the need to do, but also it does just kind of slow things down a little bit. Until we kind of get into this sort of car sequence where there's the sat-nav that's controlling the car and trying to kill them all. That's when it feels like it starts to get exciting. It starts to get a bit James Bond like we were expecting from the programme, which I think is really, really cool. And it feels like pretty much from here there's very little sort of moments to breathe almost, I find, throughout the rest of the story. There's a couple of sort of quieter, slower moments, but generally it's very much action, 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 and finding stuff out, information as well. It feels like a very fast-paced story, and I think there's nothing wrong with that personally. I really, really enjoyed that because it felt like the hour of this episode just flew by, because suddenly just it kept changing, going here, there and everywhere. Obviously the scale again coming into it with all these different locations we were going to. They're stretching out into San Francisco to meet Daniel Barton, then over to Australia where who could O be? We see him as well. Obviously already having been to Sheffield and everything. It just feels like such a well spread across the globe type story, which is so fantastic to see, I think. Maybe one of the slight disappointments was the lack of use of Stephen Fry in this episode. He didn't really have a very long... He was the kind of the guy who set them off on their task to go and, well, sort of, well, essentially just filled them in on what was going on, really, about this whole, these weird alien things that are rewriting DNA in people, and then suddenly he gets killed, and that was it. I was a little bit disappointed in that, because I was hoping that Stephen Fry would be more involved in this episode, given he's quite a major person to have in Doctor Who. To really only give him a couple of minutes screen time then kill him off was a little bit of a shame. Though at least he did give us a couple of good references to Unit and Torchwood. And I've got and actually a theory on that. I will come obviously onto the whole Master thing later on. But one theory was that maybe it's the Master that's caused the shutdown of Unit and Torchwood, because he wanted to get rid of all the Earth defences in terms of from the alien organisations there. Is that a possible theory? I don't know, but it just seems quite a cool idea, I think. So there's that. But yeah, as I say, it was a little bit of a shame, I think, that Stephen Fry didn't get so much screen time. He kind of ended up just being used as a bit of exposition, really, just explaining what's happened, what these creatures are, and explaining a little mention of what O is and things like that. That was about all he really serviced to the plot, I think, unfortunately. And then was pretty quickly killed off. So that was a little bit of a shame, but yeah, that's probably one of the sort of more disappointing factors of this story, I think. At this point, I think it'd be cool to talk about the sort of aliens of this episode. I'm not quite sure what they are, what they're called. We don't really know anything about them, frankly. Well, we know a little bit about them. We know that they can transfer through walls, including the TARDIS doors, which I know is a little bit controversial. But, and some people are like, oh, it's questionable and ignoring 56 years of continuity. I mean, to an extent, maybe yes. But also, the Doctor didn't expect that to be possible either. So I feel like these must be some particularly powerful aliens with some particularly special traits. And given the connection we now have to the Master, goodness knows what they could be and what they're able to do, let's be honest. So, like, I don't hate that as an idea, but I think that's really, really cool. It shows that even when they're in their supposed safe place of the TARDIS, they can still get in, they can still attack them. These are these alien creatures, whatever they may be. And I don't think that, I've seen some people say, oh, they're cheap, they're just silhouettes, it's a lazy way of doing it. I'm like, actually, no, these feel like really cool, really menacing, really mysterious. These white silhouette-y figures that sort of have this massive, such a glowing bright light that shines around them all the time in this whiteness, which looks really, really cool, I think, and really effective. And I think it could just potentially set up a really cool reveal if they do turn out to actually be a certain creature from the past or something. I don't know, maybe the Cybermen, as I theorised in the reaction yesterday, just it kind of feels like a slight outline of that, plus the whole Series 2 ghost thing that we saw as well in Doctor Who. It seems possible, but who knows, we'll have to wait and see. But they certainly set up a few interesting prospects about them. Well, the implication, I think, is that they are from an alternate universe of sorts. And I think that also connects into when we see quite late on into the story when the Doctor is breaking the alien code, which is showing where all these dots are, these alien, works out they're supposedly alien spies, and all these dots show where they are all over Earth, and then it spreads out into being like 12 or 15 different Earths or something like that. Could that be where we're going to be linking into the whole alternative universes, all these alternative versions of Earth where they're infiltrating and attacking, or something along those lines? I don't know, trying to destroy all the different universes of the world, because obviously we hear, when we get the one bit of dialogue from one of these aliens to the Doctor saying that he wants to take this universe, does that imply they are some sort of race that are trying to not just take over one universe, but take over all these different alternative parallel universes? And is that what their whole plot and scheme is? Which is something I feel like is unlikely to be resolved in episode 2. Maybe it will, but if it's going to stretch on, that could be an idea that stretches through to the end of the series. So that just set them up as very, very powerful and mysterious beings. Maybe it's a little bit frustrating that we know so little about them after this first story, because I'm very much like theorising based on very little information, because we just don't really know anything about them and they have so little dialogue. I don't hate that, but maybe it would be nice if we'd had a few more breadcrumbs to try and put a few things together. But as I say, I do think there's some credit and some sort of some mileage in the idea of it being a whole alternative universes thing that's going to really play out in the second part a lot more. Now at this point I also want to mention Daniel Barton, played by Lenny Henry, who I think is a really, so far at least, a pretty effective villain. He feels, to some degree, it's kind of the archetypal sort of big corporation CEO who's a bit sort of grumpy and mysterious and snaps at you a bit and is in league with some aliens apparently throughout this story as well, but he doesn't feel like he's too kind of tropey of a James Bond villain, for example, because obviously there's loads of James Bond tropes in this story with the whole car chases and gadgets and breaking into and international espionage and all these kind of different things that are very James Bond-esque. This villain does, and Lenny Henry's character Daniel Barton does feel a little bit Bond-esque, but not to, I don't think, over the top extent. I feel like it's manageable, and I think he plays it really, really well. Giving a few sort of interesting moments, that particularly his moment with the Doctor where he basically tells her to go away because he'll put her away, as it were, which I thought was a really, really cool scene between the both of them, where they've really kind of raised you could tell the tension between them was pretty serious. So I'm looking forward to his role in next week's episode, because it kind of obviously changed at the last minute. He suddenly disappeared from the plane, and then we realised actually the Master's the guy behind everything. Was a little bit of a kind of, whoa, what's going on shock? What? I'm sorry, what? But then we also saw that he's in the trailer for next week's episode, so definitely he's involved. But what exactly his involvement is, how can he be 7% non-human as well? What is that 7%? I really have absolutely no idea at the moment. I don't have any guesses, frankly. I really don't know. I'm just really intrigued to find out what it's going to be all about. Could he... I saw some maybe slightly ridiculous theories that this character was going to be an alternative universe doctor, and then this master is actually the master from an alternative universe. I'm not convinced, but I guess you'd never know. Maybe? I don't know, really. A couple of characters I want to talk about quickly are Ryan and Yaz, who I felt like were a lot better serviced in this story. They got paired off together to go and investigate Daniel Barton. I thought that worked really effectively and gave them a lot more to do between the two of them. And then Yaz being really put through the sort of ringer where she gets transported into this mysterious world of, well, I think kelp you could describe it, looking a little bit like, but also sort of tentacles hanging down from the sky. My theory, partially, maybe, is could each of these tentacles or kelp or whatever, I don't know what they're called, tendrils, whatever you want to call them, these things that are hanging down, could they be some sort of, I don't know, lead or way to a different alternative universe? And each one of these is an alternative universe that you can go through into. I don't know, maybe I'm going way too deep into that and just don't have a clue. But I feel like that's a possible theory. I do strongly think the Doctor knows where she is when she arrives there, when she goes, just the way she says, oh no, oh no, oh no, when she's really shocked. Like, I think just the way she plays it strongly implies she knows exactly where she is and that it's a really, really bad place to be. But we don't have a clue. Yaz didn't have a clue. And I thought it was such a weird but cool scene when we see the mysterious white alien creature swapping places with Yaz, and suddenly she's transported into Australia from this mysterious nowhere land. That was pretty crazy and exciting, but also then giving Yaz and Ryan a nice sort of emotional scene where Yaz sort of basically said she thought she was dead and she was sort of woken up in essentially the afterlife, I think was the idea. That's pretty sort of a harrowing experience to go through, I think, and so I think it was just great to see Yaz get a lot more to do, as was the same for Ryan as well. He had a fair bit to do. I think probably the one character in this story that wasn't maybe serviced so well was Graham. Apart from his nice scene at the very beginning, he sort of got paired off with the Doctor and then almost kind of, well, we saw O's character kind of saying that, is he just there to provide a running commentary? And unfortunately, to an extent, it felt like that was the case in this episode. He didn't ever really have anything individual to do or anything practical to do in this story. He very much was there with the Doctor, kind of helping out, trying to rein her in sometimes and kind of unfortunately just not having that much more to do, which is a little bit of a shame. But I can kind of, I think it's fundamentally difficult to have four main characters, plus adding in basically the Master, and trying to make them all have substantial roles in only a 60-minute episode. I just don't think it really works. So let's just hope Graham isn't the guy who gets badly serviced for the whole series and it was just this episode, but we'll have to see, I guess, as we go through. I felt this story just continued to kind of pick up towards the end as we saw the nice casino scene with the Doctor obviously being useless at, well, think she was playing Snap was just a great classic Doctor-y moment, I thought. And then we get to the great car chase scene with Lenny Henry shooting at the Doctor and co on bikes, was just bonkers and wacky, and I thought really, really genuinely exciting. And then them obviously arriving on the plane, getting onto the plane, and then as soon as they're all on that plane, that scene's got to be one of my favourite scenes in Doctor Who for a pretty long time, I think. Now, yes, as I've mentioned in a couple of previous videos, I did have some awareness that Sacha Dhawan, well, the rumour I'd read was that Sacha Dhawan was the Master and was in this episode. That is the rumour I'd read. Ultimately, that was true. But at the time, although I knew, when Sacha Dhawan was there, I'm like, oh, this is interesting, this is exciting. I did not automatically think, wow, he's definitely the Master, because although there's a few hints there, and when you go back through, obviously you look at it and you can kind of spot, oh yeah, that kind of suggests he might be the Master. Oh, maybe that as well. Yeah. But until the moment he actually reveals it, I was genuinely shocked in that moment, and I was like, this is amazing. How can he's actually the Master? What? This is crazy. So I thought this has got to be one of the best kind of twist endings in Doctor Who for a very long time. Because most of the times we've had major characters returning or things happening, aliens returning, whatever, usually it's been either leaked to the press or announced by the Doctor Who production team, which has been a shame at times for both reasons. So I was so pleased that we had an ending, a cliffhanger, a shock reveal that was genuinely a shock, was genuinely surprising to the audience, and I'll hats off to Chris Chibnall for that. He did it with Broadchurch and he's done it again with Doctor Who in terms of actually holding back all the spoilers for Series 12 has been very very good news, because it's mean these things have genuinely been a surprise to the audience rather than just announcing it like maybe Stephen Moffat would have done back in his days, or even RTD as well. So I really am thankful to Chris Chibnall for doing that and actually being able to keep this a secret, because it never leaked it into any like news outlet as far as I know. Even after the screening, nobody actually leaked it, even from there either, as well, into at least into like the Sun or something. Nobody reported on it, which I thought was brilliant and really, really impressive. So I was so pleased about that, and it was just such, as I say, a really satisfying moment when he sort of revealed as the Master. And even in just a few short moments we saw of him as the Master there, he felt so immediately like the Master, so kind of crazy and unhinged, but also the suave, sort of suave evil genius type character that he was playing a little bit as well, maniacal genius. It was just we saw all of that in such a short space of time, which was so effective and brilliant to see. And we got a couple of lovely nods back to the past. Well, first off, the pretty major one was we saw the Master's TARDIS, can I say for the first time since the 80s. We didn't see it at all in New Who until this point, but suddenly we see the Master's TARDIS is the Barton flying alongside the plane, and that actually, we've already seen the interior of the TARDIS, or parts of the interior of the TARDIS, because the Doctor and Graham and, well, all of them were inside the barn, which is what the TARDIS was. Like, that's brilliant, I love that. So when we might finally get to see a proper Master TARDIS consult, which we haven't seen for so long, I'd be genuinely so excited to see that. And of course, also the tissue compression eliminator, the absolute classic Master sort of gadget that he used to have way back in the 70s. From his very first episode, that was the thing he used to miniaturise people and then put them, well, I remember the one in the lunchbox and tear up the Autons and things like that. It's just such a cool thing to bring back, such a classic Master move, Master tool. I love that Chris decided those were the things he wanted to use for the Master again. It's just brilliant, it's so effective. I think works so well. Now, I know one of the negative things that people have been talking about is this kind of presents problems in regards to Missy and her sort of end of her arc in Series 10, in terms of her seemingly kind of turning good, but not quite. And then, well, we don't really know if she's quite turned good or not. And then obviously being killed off, essentially, as far as we could see on screen. And then now turning up like this and seemingly being completely evil again. Now, one theory which I would actually love to see is that this is a Master from not the after Gomez, but before that, at some point in between the previous Master incarnations. Given the use of some of the older stuff like the tissue compression eliminator, could it be a more a Master even that's come sort of maybe between the classic and new series Masters, say maybe between the Eric Roberts and Derek Jacobi Master? That'd be quite a cool place to slot one in, I think. That'd be really, really interesting. So there's lots of possibilities from that point of view. And I do understand people's kind of maybe slight disappointment if it does end up being Arthur Gomez, the kind of character development is being sort of swept away. And to an extent, I can understand that. I'm not sure, as much as they tried to play it, I'm not sure how much she turned completely good by the end of The Doctor Falls. It was left a little bit open to interpretation, but it's definitely possible. And as we say, the Master always seemingly dies on screen at the end of an episode and then comes back in the future as another incarnation. Like, that's almost a stereotypical Master trait, to die and then come back. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's after Gomez, but I'd love to see it if this Master was a little bit earlier on in the timeline or something like that. I think that would be really just an interesting thing that we haven't seen done on TV before, in terms of having the Masters not in the right order. But overall, I think the whole use of the Master in this story is so effectively done. It's a classic Master thing for him to go undercover, secretly hide himself from the Doctor, and then suddenly turn up and realise it's him. The fact that he named himself O just from the moment where she goes "Oh" when she realises it's the Master, it's just crazy. I love it. That is such a Master thing to do. And then it means it doesn't give anything away because it's not an M. If they called him M, it would have been obvious, but the fact they call them O is just, I love that. I absolutely love that. And just his sort of, the smirk he gives when he realises he's been caught out and he gets his favourite moment of revealing, "Hello, I'm the Master, I'm back." It's just so perfect. He clearly is going to be, I really think he's going to be such a good Master. He looks, Sacha Dhawan, I've always thought he was a great actor. I think he's going to really play this part so well. Based on just these few minutes, it's really interesting. So yeah, I feel like the whole character of O was just so intriguingly set up. It seemed like he was just a really sort of almost like a fan of the Doctor, a little bit stalkery maybe, with the whole, I've got this whole bookshelf of stuff about the Doctor, oh, what's this all about? But then obviously revealing himself to be the Master was just the perfect way to end this story, and set it up on a pretty crazy cliffhanger with the Doctor trapped in this nowhere land or whatever it is, who knows even what it is. Brian, Graham and Yaz about to crash in the plane to die basically, and the Master is teleported away somewhere else. So I'm not quite sure how we're going to get out of this really. It's a pretty crazy one, and I'm really excited to find out what's going to happen next. So yes, overall I feel like this episode isn't perfect. Maybe it starts off a bit slow, the use of Stephen Fry was a little bit disappointing. There's some little bits in there that just aren't quite brilliant, But overall, I personally think this is better than anything we've seen from the Chris Chibnall era so far. It feels like a definite step up from Series 11. It's not like it's a completely different show from Series 11. Like, there's still a lot of the way that the show was done last year or in Series 11 is done in this episode, but it just feels like it's done so much more effectively with so much more excitement and energy and action and adventure to throw into it, to mix in with the more sort of quieter character moments between the companions and the Doctor, and all those elements are just so effectively put together. I think I really would give this maybe like a 9 out of 10. It feels like a genuinely really good episode of Doctor Who. And before I forget, one other thing I wanted to mention was the music from this episode from Segun Akinola, who I feel like has also taken a step up for Series 12 compared to Series 11. I very much got more Murray Gold vibes from this story in terms of the music compared to what most of the Series 11 soundtrack was like, where it was much more atmospheric and background music. It felt like at a lot of points in this episode the music was really leading the scene. The moment when the Master is revealed, the music is so fantastic. It's so sort of ominous and dramatic, and oh no, the Doctor's arch enemy has appeared, we're all in danger now, we're all screwed basically, and it just felt like the music really brought that out. I loved all the little James Bond type moments they had where they sort of did 13's theme in a James Bond style. It just all works so brilliant. I thought the music just really complemented this story in a much better way than maybe it did at times last year, and I'm really looking forward to hearing the sort of soundtrack versions of some of these tracks, because there's some really good ones there that are really worth listening to on their own, I think. So I'm really excited to hear all of that. But yes, I need to stop rambling now because this video's been going on for ages. So overall, it was a fantastic way to start Series 12, a genuinely really exciting, action-packed adventure that I'm really genuinely so excited to see what's going to happen in the second part, how everything's going to be resolved. What isn't going to be resolved in the next episode is the key thing for me, really. I'm just so intrigued to see what it's all going to be about. So yes, as I said at the start, guys, remember to let me know down below in the comments what you thought of this episode, and hopefully I'll include some of your guys' comments in my video coming up later this week, or before Spyfall Part 2, I should say. But apart from that, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. As always, hit the like button, that subscribe button, and I'll see you again very soon for another video. Goodbye!